Okay, my name is Lawrence McGlynn, and you're listening to the award-winning Philadelphia Hall Monitor here on WPPM 106.5 in Philadelphia, on Comcast Channel 66, and streaming live at phillycam.org. You can find us on Twitter at Hall Monitor WPPM, on our website www.hallmonitor.org, or on Facebook at PHMWPPM. Tonight on the program, Lance Haber will discuss property tax appeals. Denise Clay-Murray will present on the Commonwealth budget, and Vanessa Maria Graber will update us on this as to the status of state legislation aimed at local news. Denise, how are you tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing okay. Now, you're going to get us kicked off here with the state budget. So yesterday was the governor's budget address. That actually is an important milestone for us here in the city as well, not just because it's the state budget, and that's very important, but because that also ushers in our budget season. But we'll talk about that on subsequent shows. Tell us a little bit about what you took from his address yesterday.
Well, here we go. Governor Shapiro's 2026-2027 fiscal year budget. In as much of a nutshell as I can do it. Yesterday, Governor Shapiro delivered his 2026-2027 budget address. As you can see, it was a joint session between the House and the Senate in Harrisburg, and everybody who was anybody was there. It's a $53.2 billion plan that has a couple of things that might be familiar to Philadelphians. Like, for example, Shapiro proposed a $1 billion infrastructure fund that would be paid for through issued bonds. Among the things that the bonds would pay for is housing, which, we all kind of knew was a statewide problem, but he's like, it's a statewide problem. We really need to deal with it. So that's why the picture of Mayor Parker and Council President Johnson is illustrating this slide, because that was who I thought of when I heard this proposal. Now, Philadelphia's crime prevention efforts could get a boost because the budget for the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquencies, Violence Intervention and Prevention Programs is going to get $5.2 million, a $5.2 million boost, which is going, and also the Building Opportunity Through Out of School Time program is going to get another $1 million boost for a $5.2 million increase for one, and 12, wow. And it brings up the boost funding to $12.5 million. So that could help Philadelphians out a lot. There was also a part of the budget that talked about childcare and training people to do childcare stipends. The governor is talking about increasing that. Education's also getting a boost. An additional $565 million through the bipartisan adequacy formula. Now, I have no idea exactly how that works. That's a Lisa Haver thing. We'll have to have her on to talk about. But that is supposed to be aimed at the schools most in need, and that would have to include Philadelphia. Basic education and special education are each getting $50 million additional. And that funding is going to support like after school programs, full day pre-K and in kindergarten, and reading and different things. Another thing that I found interesting about the governor's education proposals is that the state school board, which now has 2 parents on it, is looking at ways to incorporate recess back into the school day. Now, once upon a time, this wasn't necessary because recess was a given. You had recess every day, or right after lunch, everybody went out in the playground and ran around before they came back to class. But with the emphasis that's been placed on high stakes testing in education, a lot of the recess time has been repurposed to be test study time. So what they started to notice is that the kids were getting burned out because they had no space to play or to relax or to hang out with friends. And that was causing some issues with socialization. So the state school board is looking at ways to incorporate recess into the school day. Another thing that Governor Shapiro is trying to incorporate in terms of education is a no cell phone day for the kids. Like the minute you walk in school, your cell phone gets put away and you don't get it back until you leave for the day. They want to have a bell to bell ban on cell phones in school. And a couple of school districts already have that, but the governor would like to do it statewide. But while Shapiro's budget included some conventional stuff, there was some unconventional stuff too. Now, I didn't notice until yesterday. I kind of had an idea that the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania pays a lot in taxes, but the Commonwealth pays $1.58 billion, that's with a B, in federal taxes. Because the Trump administration gets up every morning and thinks, what money can we pull away from poor people, education, and states I don't like because they didn't vote for me. The Commonwealth has had to go to court 19 times to sue the Trump administration to get back a total of $3 billion that it was supposed to, that had already been appropriated through Congress for the state. And that is taken on, like I had heard that AmeriCorps was getting ready to close until a lawsuit was filed to keep it open. SNAP, Title I funding, healthcare grants, demands to see the records of trans children getting gender affirming care at Children's Hospital in Philadelphia. It's been a little bit of everything. So Shapiro decided that he wanted to start a fund that would safeguard the Commonwealth from the Trump administration's baser impulses. Now, the fund would have a $100 million seed money. There would be other ways to get money for this particular fund, but I'm not sure that it even gets the $100 million in seed money, because you can always tell who's going to support something by who stands up and claps when that something is proposed. And the thing I noticed is that nobody on the Republican side in the chamber stood up and clapped when this was proposed. So I don't know if he's going to be able to pull this off, but it's an interesting thing. And you will probably see a lot more states doing this kind of thing where they're trying to protect themselves from the government by having a backup fund that will allow them to continue to do what their citizens need despite that. And you and I have watched as council has tackled the issue of skill games, because sometimes you can go to your corner bodega and there's a slot machine or online poker or different things. And council has tried to get them out of those places because they don't feel that they belong there. And they're probably right. But Shapiro, in his budget, wants to see them regulated. He says it could raise $2 billion annually for the Commonwealth. Money that would go into the general fund. The tax would be like 52% on these games. Now, on the one hand, you have people who don't want them in their neighborhoods, like the folks on council who don't want them in bodegas or restaurants or anything like that. And then you're going to have the skill game people themselves who don't want to be taxed to go into neighborhoods. So it's going to be interesting to see how this shakes out, because would that $2 billion annually be a great thing? Yes. but only if you take into consideration that you're also going to have a fund that helps people who basically who have gambling addictions. You have to take that into consideration. Every other state that does these kind of things takes into consideration the fact that you have to have something to help people when they go too far. Another thing that the governor proposed is legalizing adult use cannabis. Now, personally, most of the people I know who consume cannabis, they do it in the form of gummies. There are things that you can use like ointments and stuff that for pain that have marijuana in them. In many cases, it's better for you than opioids because you don't want to end up, you don't want to end up on the streets of Kensington trying to find heroin because your doctor cut you off. So adult use cannabis, and there are a few places around the country, most notably Colorado, where legalizing cannabis for adult use has led to them being able to pay for their schools and do different things that Pennsylvania would like to do, but doesn't have the money to do. Now, for the third year in a row, the governor has proposed legalizing cannabis, saying it would generate $200 million annually. He wants to include in legalizing cannabis a $25 million fund that would help small and diverse businesses enter the market. And it would also include a $10 million restorative justice fund. Now, the $25 million small and diverse businesses fund would be very significant because the entry fee for starting a cannabis dispensary, and I know this because I have family that have tried it, is extremely high. It's thousands of dollars. And if you don't have that kind of money for any particular reason, or you can't access it, you can't get a loan for it because nationally, cannabis is illegal. It's a Schedule I drug. So you can't get a loan to start a business around it. So it's hard for people to enter the market. It's hard for the market to be diverse. So if this is actually passed, that the fact that they want to have a fund that helps with that, it is it's going to be good for the folks in those communities who want to enter the cannabis market. And the minimum wage came up. Ohio, and this really surprised me, Ohio has a higher minimum wage than Pennsylvania. West Virginia has a higher minimum wage than Pennsylvania. In fact, all of Pennsylvania's neighbors, New Jersey, Maryland, West Virginia, Ohio, all of Pennsylvania's, Delaware, all of Pennsylvania's neighbors have a higher minimum wage. Some are already at $15 an hour. A bill raising the minimum wage has been passed in the House twice, and Shapiro's like, it needs to come to my desk because it would help increase the number of people who want to come here to work. It would put more money in the pockets of Philadelphians. It would, and it would also, fix something that hasn't been fixed in 15 years. The minimum wage has not been raised in Pennsylvania for 15 years. So it's kind of about time. Now, budget negotiations were supposed to begin today. They were going to, he said during his speech that all of the members of caucus that handle the budget were supposed to meet in his office today to get the negotiations process started. Because if you remember, last year's budget came in really late. And because of that, school districts had to borrow money to keep the doors open, and various other things happened. So they started negotiations today. The new fiscal year begins on July 1st, and we shall see what happens. But one thing I have to mention, the subject of a dedicated funding stream for mass transit came up during the governor's speech. Unfortunately, it came up in such a way that it basically reminded us that the funding that the governor put out for mass transit entities, particularly in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, is a 2-year stopgap measure. The can has been kicked down the road until 2027. But as part of the speech, he said he wants dedicated funding put a dedicated funding source put together by 2027. I would think that if it's not in your budget for the current fiscal year, it's not going to be there in 2027. So that's another thing we kind of need to keep an eye on in terms of whether or not we're going to get mass transit funding ever.
Yeah, I was surprised by that as well, Denise. It's been a problem. It's still a problem, and it doesn't feel like it's going to be addressed, at least not yet in this budget cycle at the state level.
No, it's not. And like I said, and of course, the Republicans have already come out and said that this plan, which is a $2.7 billion jump over last year's plan, is unsustainable. We can't fund it, and everything like that. And it's going to be interesting to see how dedicated they are to that stance with midterm elections coming up.
Yeah, everything that helps people is unsustainable. That's true. It's going to be all that's going to factor into this. Every decision is a political decision. So we will find out what road this takes as we get closer to the midterms. Well, Denise, thank you so much for that. And now we're going to bring on Lance Haver to walk us through this saga that you're dealing with, Lance.
Well, yes, I'm happy to talk about it, but I wanted to ask Denise, I watched the governor's speech too. And one of the things that I was impressed with is how good he is. It's not that his policies are good or that I believed him. 3 years ago, he announced more funding he was going to get more money for SEPTA. 2 years ago, he announced he was going to get more money for SEPTA. Last year, he announced he was going to get more money for SEPTA. The old saying is, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I don't know if there's a saying for fool me 4 times.
Well, it kind of feels like, Charlie Brown and Lucy, she's always holding the football. And he thinks that every time he runs up to that football, that this is going to be the time that he actually gets to kick it. I'm starting to feel that way about mass transit funding in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. The governor puts the football right there and lets SEPTA and Pittsburgh Transportation Center and system and all of the other public transportation systems come running for that ball, and it gets pulled away every year. So
it's just I agree with you, but I did not expect him to be so smooth, and I don't want to use the word charismatic, but enjoyable to listen to.
Well, that's why he's being talked about as a possible candidate in 2028. You don't, for the Democratic presidential nomination, you don't get where he is without knowing how to present yourself.
Yeah, it's like Governor Wolf. No one ever accused him of being charismatic, and yet he won 2 terms easily. But anyway, I was just surprised. I guess I had never really paid that much attention to his style. I'd always been focused on his substance, but his style was really good. Now, as for my report, I want to start out by saying a few things. First, more than likely this year, Philadelphia homeowners are going to face another reassessment. And we're not going to know that until the mayor's speech on her budget. But I believe, and I have been told, that they're already starting that. And one of the things we will see is in the budget is how much they estimate the value of real estate in the city will go up. And we know from whatever projections they have for revenues that what they're telling us is not just what they think of the business cycle, but what they also think of what's happening to housing prices. So unfortunately for many people, especially people who are on fixed income, taxes remain a real challenge. Taxes, utility bills go up. The governor did spend a fair amount of time talking about what he's going to do to lower electric bills. The governor of New Jersey has made that a number one issue. But we have to face the reality that if people are on fixed income, Social Security or pensions, the amount that real estate taxes have been going up, there's no way possible for them to keep up with them. The city Controller Brady, estimates that in the last 3 years, the assessed property values in the city of Philadelphia have gone up on average 31%. Now, obviously, for some people, it's significantly more, and for some people, it's significantly less. But 31% on average is a very large increase. So I wanted to take a look at property values in general, and then talk a little bit about what's supposed to happen if they get it wrong. So real estate taxes, the way it works, it's not like the wage tax. Now, again, the wage tax only taxes wages. It doesn't tax what someone makes from dividends or from capital gains or from interest or from business investments. It only taxes wages. So if you're a worker, you pay the wage tax. But the wage tax is easy to understand. City council has to go vote on a number, and that's the number that everyone pays on their wages. Nothing about it. You don't like what city council did, you vote them out of office. When it comes to real estate taxes, it's not straightforward. There are two parts to it. One part is what's called the tax rate, and the other part is the assessment. And so hidden behind the Great Oz's curtains, like in The Wizard of Oz, who you're not supposed to pay any attention to, is this Office of Property Assessment. Who they are, how they got there, all those things are unknown. But what they are is very clearly the drivers of continual tax increases. Now, not tax rate increases, tax rates. So every year, they're supposed to do a reassessment. Some years, they skip them. But what we saw in the last time it was studied by the state, and this is where it gets to be really kind of awkward, the Office of Property Assessment bragged that they were only 8% wrong. Now, if you're one of those 8% who gets the wrong bill, obviously it's not very good for you. So you would think that built into the system, because again, their numbers, this comes from them. Philadelphia's most recent success rate was 92%. So that number comes from them. And what ends up happening is you should be some way to avoid the increases. We look at how the market assessment is made. So again, these are people who we don't elect. We're not allowed to know what their educational background is. They pass an appraiser's test, and they're supposed to decide what your house is worth. According to them, it doesn't matter what you paid for your house. They don't care about the actual market value. What they care about is what they consider the assessed value, what they assess the property for. And there's two parts to property taxes. One is the building, and the other is the land. And you have two ways you can challenge what your tax is. There's what's called a first level review, and then there's a formal review. But here's where it starts getting tricky. The only way you can file the first level review is if you read beyond the letter that you're sent that says, this is not a tax increase, this is not a tax bill. So here, what we're looking at here is what happens. The real estate taxes are due this March 31st, and the tax rate is 1.3998%, 1.4%. And just as an aside, just to show you how powerful banks are, every one of us who has a mortgage is paying our taxes through the mortgage. the banks collect those payments, lend them to other people, make money on it, and then they don't actually have to pay the taxes until March 31st. So April, May, June, July, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December, January, February, March are all months that the banks get to collect interest on. We don't get the interest back. We don't get anything. All we get is to pay. But that's just an aside for how powerful the banking interests are in the United States. So this amount is straightforward, 1.4%. But what's not straightforward is the assessment. If these unelected people decide that you paid $250,000 for your house, they don't take that into consideration. They say that doesn't matter. What matters is what they say the house is worth. And they say that there are certain things that they look at to decide what the house is worth. Now, this is what we get in the mail. And I don't know how easy it is for our viewers to see it, but this is what starts the first level of contesting the real estate taxes. It says in big letters, this is not a bill. So most people look at it and say, well, you know, it's not a bill, so I'm not sure why they're sending it to me. But this is the paper where they tell you what the new property value they claim is. And they send it to you. And even though it says it's not a bill, you should, if you're concerned, pay attention to it. Because the first level that you can challenge, the only way you can do it is through this letter that they send you. Now it says this is not a bill. And then there's a letter that follows. And that letter that follows says, enclosed is a notice of property market valuation for 2025. This information is being sent to you because there has been a change in either the total market value of your property or in the components that make up the total market value of your property. Now, of course, I don't believe many people understand what's being said here. What they're trying to say is, well, maybe we raised your land or maybe we raised the building on your land, but we raised something. But then they try and tell you, don't worry, this is not a tax bill, but this is important information that may impact your tax bill. You'll receive additional communication from the city regarding available tax relief programs. So if you look at the first page, it says this is not a tax bill, and then you actually decide to read the letter, you get told again, just don't worry about it, you're going to get something else in the mail. But what this is the only way that you can go through the first level. There's a form in this letter that you have to send back. The city webpage doesn't mention it. There's no form you can download. There is a phone number you can call if somehow you misplace it. But of course, if you misplace the form, you've misplaced the letter, and there'd be no way for you to know what number to call. And if you think the phone gets answered, I'm going to say to you, please line up to buy yesterday's lottery ticket that you already didn't win, because the phone doesn't get answered. What happens next is there is a formal proceeding, which is what I went through, and I'm going to talk a little bit about at the end, where you can formally challenge it. Now, there is a tax review board. These are well-paid people who work part-time, $70,000 a year each. But there's no way for anyone to know how to prepare for this. And that's because the city doesn't tell you. And the city doesn't tell you for a very important reason. The way that property real estate taxes are increased allows the elected officials off the hook. They don't have, unlike the wage tax or unlike business taxes, where they have to vote for a set rate, elected officials don't have to vote to raise property taxes. They let the assessors increase the assessment and people have to pay more. And the elected officials kind of say, oh, well, you know, it's not our fault. The assessors have done it. In every other county in Pennsylvania, the assessment has to be revenue neutral. So if the assessment goes up, the tax rate goes down. But in Philadelphia, which is called the city of the first class, there's an exemption. So the way the city works is they say, we're opposed to raising property taxes. We're not going to raise property taxes. And we didn't raise property taxes. It's those assessors over there that did it to you. They raised the value. And that's the issue. So the webpage, which explains what the Office of Property Assessment does, doesn't tell you what the hearing process is, doesn't tell you what you should bring, doesn't tell you how you should prepare, doesn't tell you who you're going to be in front of. And when I say in front of, I'm kind of exaggerating, because when you go, even though Mayor Parker said everybody's supposed to show up in person, no more virtual attendance for workers, no more virtual attendance for the city. Well, apparently the Tax Review Board didn't get the memo because they don't show up. And the significance of that is then you don't get to see who you're talking to, and you don't get to challenge them, and you don't get to be involved in what's going on. They simply hide behind a camera and turn your camera off when they want to stop you. So the webpage doesn't tell you. And again, the significance of all this is if there is another reassessment, which I'm told there will be, the question is, what will the council members do? Will they help people fight the reassessments, or will they look the other way so that there's more money in the city budget and they don't have to accept responsibility for it? There's one other thing that most people, I think, don't recognize. The city has what's called a debt ratio limit. They can only borrow a certain amount of money. But that limit is based on the value of real estate tax assessments. So it's a 10-year average of tax years assessments. Every year that the assessments go up, the city can borrow more money without having to put it on the ballot. So if the city wants a couple $100 million to borrow and use for whatever it wants to use it for, it can do that without asking the voters' permissions if the assessments go up. So the city has this incredible vested interest in allowing the assessors to raise everyone's property value. One, the city gets more money. Two, the school district gets more money. And that both happens without anybody standing up and saying, I'm in favor of raising property taxes. Nobody says that. Instead, they can all stand up and say, we're going to lower business taxes, we're going to lower wage taxes, and it's not our fault property taxes are going up. Now, there are programs, and some of the programs are very good, like the homestead exemption, that help people stay in their homes. But the process of challenging what the assessor says is so bizarre that it's almost unbelievable. City doesn't help you, doesn't prepare for it. And here's what happened to me. Now, I did this partly as an experiment and partly because I'm very fortunate. I have a nice place I live. On the paper, it's called 3 bedrooms. Well, there aren't 3 bedrooms where I live. There are 2 bedrooms. And I can't find a 3rd bedroom. I did check. I opened the closet doors. I looked around, saw if there was a trap door someplace. But the first hearing I went to, I walk in and I'm put in front of a computer screen and they say, okay, your hearing begins. And then I'm given 7 pages from the appraiser. And I'm supposed to read through those 7 pages while I'm talking at the hearing, which of course is impossible. And I'm supposed to refute what they say, which of course is impossible because I haven't seen it before. And I'm supposed to now have my own information, my own comparables, which of course, had the web page told me, or had I gotten a letter, or had I gotten any information, I would have been prepared. But nobody told me anything because every one of these people on the tax review board is paid by the city, and the city has this incredible vested interest in making sure the assessments go up. So I challenged the tax review board, and I challenged the chairman, and he decided to continue the case, and he sent out the appraiser. Now, there are 3 things that came out from the appraiser visiting me. The first was the appraiser agreed my place is 2 bedrooms. So I figured 3 bedrooms is on paper. If it goes back to what it is, 2 bedrooms, obviously it shouldn't be worth as much as what she said it was. Well, that turned out not to be the case. And the reason she gave at the hearing was, even though my place is 2 bedrooms, it could be 3 bedrooms. See, I could take our living room and put up a wall, and that would make it 3 bedrooms. So I tried to ask, what's the definition of a bedroom? I mean, isn't there some rule or something that should say, how big does a bedroom have to be? Is a bedroom 8 by 4, 6 by 8? I mean, how big is it? And they wouldn't answer. The second thing that happened was I was given another 7 pages, and I couldn't look at it while I was talking, obviously. So I wasn't allowed to do it. I submitted 14 other what are called comparables. Other 2 bedrooms, not 3, because we only have 2 bedrooms, showing that the assessment was wrong. The assessment was based on 3 bedrooms. I don't know what happened to them because none of the people at the hearing looked at them. The amenities for the buildings, again, I don't want to complain because Lisa and I are very fortunate, but we don't have a gym in our building. We don't have a doorman. We don't have a sauna. Those are all things that are very nice, but we don't have them. And you would think that a building that has a gym and a sauna and a doorman, the condos, the apartments would be worth more than a building that doesn't. So I tried to get on the record a comparison between the buildings, what the building's amenities were. And I got told that's not important. And the final thing that I tried to get on the record was, what's the school catchment area? So where you live and where your kids have a legal right to go to school matters, I think. I think if you live in the Penn Alexander catchment area, in the Meredith catchment area, in the Greenfield catchment area, people will pay extra to live in those neighborhoods so they believe their kids get a superior education. I mean, the truth is there's nothing more important to any of us than our own children. And if we can get our children into what we believe is a better school, we're willing to struggle to do that. All of us want nothing more than our kids to have a better chance than we had. So I thought, well, look, our neighborhood school is great. Coppin is a great school, but it doesn't have the reputation of Meredith or Greenfield. And people don't pay the same amount of premium to be in the Coppin area as they do to be in the Penn Alexander system. So I said, do you take this into consideration? And the appraiser said, no, absolutely not. The catchment area doesn't matter. It's insignificant. So I made a motion that she be disqualified because there is no sane realtor who would tell you that the value of a house has nothing to do with the schools. I mean, it's just, I'm laughing because it's so bizarre, but yet that's what I got told. Now, I had 14 questions I wanted to ask, and I got told it wasn't a conversation, and I did become angry, and I said, I'm not trying to have a conversation. We're not friends. I'm not trying to engage you on a personal level. You are taking something from me. You are raising my property taxes, and I want to ask my questions. I got told I don't have a right to ask those questions, and I did not have a right to cross-examine the assessor. And as I was raising objections to that, the chairman, because he wasn't in person, just turned off my mic. And that was the end of the hearing. Now, 3 weeks later, I got a letter in the mail that said, denied. No explanation for why, no mention of what the vote was of the board. Maybe it was unanimous, maybe it wasn't, and no written findings. So there's no findings of fact. I still don't understand why, if I submitted 14 comparables showing that 2 bedrooms are worth less than 3 bedrooms, why that didn't matter, or an explanation for why an assessor can decide that even though my place has 2 bedrooms, it could have 3. All I have to do is build a wall and I'll have a 3rd bedroom. Again, just one of those things where you have to look at the person and go, you're kidding me, right? It's unlimited bedrooms. All you have to do is keep adding walls. How does that work? And so I lost. The good news from my point of view is it's not going to have a very negative impact on the quality of my life. But what I found shocking was I got a nasty email from the director of the tax review board because I challenged them. And here's what she wrote. This is a direct quote. I find that appellants that show up to their hearings argumentative and combative never feel like they get a fair hearing. Now those are the words of a despot, right? I wasn't servile enough. I didn't, I'm not going to say it, but I didn't kiss enough rear ends, right? That was it. I was supposed to go in and beg. I was supposed to go in and say, oh, great Wizard of Oz, please take pity on me because I can't afford this. And please, please, please lower my property taxes. Now, I'm not going to do that. I don't think that's what justice requires. I don't think that's what a fair hearing requires. I don't think I should have to go in and bend at the knee and kiss somebody's rear end so I get a fair hearing. But that's exactly what the chair of the Tax Review Board told me. She finds that appellants who show up at hearings argumentative and combative never feel like they get a fair hearing. So if you stand up for yourself, if you challenge them, if you argue for your own sake, you can't win because they're going to teach you a lesson. Now, again, the situation is that there are a number of programs. One is the homestead exemption. Now that takes $100,000 off of what people pay in property tax. So if your house is assessed for $300,000, you get a homestead advantage exemption of $100,000. You only pay that tax rate, that 1.4 tax rate on $200,000. And as Denise has reported over the years, if you have some remodeling done in your house, if you've redone your kitchen or your bathroom, you should still get the 10-year tax abatement on that portion that you've redone. But things don't really know. And so when we go forward and when we look at what's going to happen with the new assessments, we really have to ask council to play a role in making sure the hearings are fair.
All right. Well, Lance, thank you so much for that. And it's a very strange situation they have going on there. So, but thank you so much for doing that. And hopefully somebody will see this and the situation will change a little bit. Now I'd like to bring in Vanessa Maria Graber to tell us what's going on at the state level with some interesting legislation.
Hello. Today I went to Harrisburg, to our state capitol, to check out the vote on the Pennsylvania local news package. We interviewed Representative Chris Rabb a few weeks ago, who introduced this legislation that's designed to support fellowships for journalists and also the creation of a civic information consortium, which is modeled after the one in New Jersey, which would be a grant-making body that would be given money to organizations like ours and local newsrooms across the state. Again, this is pretty big deal for Pennsylvania to think about using public funds to support local journalism. So I made a little video, and let's take a listen to some of what folks said while we were at the state capitol today. Hey, this is Vanessa Maria Graber, and I'm here at the state capitol in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And we are about to go into the House Committee on Communication and Technology for a vote on the Pennsylvania local news package of bills, which is sponsored by Representative Chris Rabb.
This legislation is measured and is a constitutional response. It does not tell journalists what to say. It does not pick winners or losers. It protects the conditions under which a free press can survive. Independence, pluralism, and public access to credible civic information. This work is personal to me. My great-great-grandfather, John Henry Murphy Sr., was a Civil War veteran in Maryland who in the 1890s founded the Baltimore Afro-American newspaper, still in existence today, one of the oldest continuously run family-owned newspapers in the country. Because then Black communities were denied truthful coverage and a voice in mainstream media. He understood that democracy cannot function when people are kept in the dark. This bill carries forth that legacy, and I would really appreciate an affirmative vote today. Thank you.
All right, we just got out of the House Communications and Technology Committee. We're here in Harrisburg at the state capitol with Representative Chris Rabb. Tell us a little bit about what just happened and this package of bills for Pennsylvania local news.
Absolutely. Well, I'm pleased to say that the two bills, HB 2047 and 2048, passed by a vote of 14 to 12 out of committee. So now those bills can move to the House floor. The votes were along party lines, so all Democrats voted for it and all Republicans voted against it. That said, there seemed to be a lot of conceptual support philosophical support for the idea of investing in local news, local journalism, and civic information. However, because of largely political ideologies, there was pushback because there was a mischaracterization of what the bills actually did around government mandated this or that, when in fact that's not what's happening. It creates an independent autonomous authority, the Pennsylvania Civic Information Consortium, and then a separate journalism fellowship that is not mandatory, that is not exclusively government funded. It would get seed funding from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, but it would have a structure that is independent of the political system and state government to facilitate investments in infrastructure, not just content, staffing, because we have a landscape here in Pennsylvania where there are 17 counties that have one or fewer local news outlets. And so this would address these news deserts, and would also address the fact that we need to have a robust fourth estate in Pennsylvania and abroad. And this takes from the very strong success of New Jersey, where this has been in place for 6 years and has helped dozens of organizations get funding in a time when that is very difficult.
Can you tell us why you're so passionate about local news and the First Amendment?
I'm passionate about this issue because one of my ancestors founded the Baltimore Afro-American newspaper in the 1890s. John Henry Murphy Sr. got a loan from his wife to acquire a church-run reader, a newsletter, and evolve that into what today is the oldest continuously run family-owned black newspaper in the nation. And it's something I'm proud of. I served on the board for 10 years, and it's still in existence, and its archive is even more valuable than the newsmaking side of it, because it captures black life in society over generations when mainstream media refused to cover the life and contributions of African Americans, not just in Baltimore, but nationwide. So it's a powerful legacy that has always inspired me, and this is one of the many reasons I support legislation that strengthens the fourth estate journalism and civic information.
And are you concerned about some of the current threats to press freedom, especially as we're seeing arrests of black journalists in Minneapolis?
I'm deeply concerned about it. This is an authoritarian federal administration that is weaponizing our government against the very people who are supporting and are emblematic of the most important parts of our constitutional framework as a society, most notably the First Amendment. So being able to freely express yourself, to freedom of assembly, these things are being attacked right now, which is why an independent media is so important, particularly media that is independent of Wall Street influence and corporate influence. Those are the organizations and professionals who need the most investment, particularly in times when authoritarian forces are cracking down on independent voices.
Thank you so much, Representative Chris Rabb. He is the co-sponsor and lead champion of the Pennsylvania Local News Package.
Thank you.
Hillary, can you tell us why you decided to vote for the 2 local news bills today and why local news is important to you?
Sure. Local news is critical for not just me, but for my constituents, for our civic discourse. It's so important that we as elected officials, that we as a body politic, that we as kind of public servants do everything we can to ensure that our public is well informed. We certainly try and do that in our offices. We theoretically try and do that through our campaigns, but most importantly, we depend on journalism. We depend on local reporters. We depend on local voices to both hold us all accountable, not just local government, but governments throughout this world. So trying to do what is appropriate, what is right, and what is responsible, and protecting those local agencies and helping them grow. It's more important now than ever. We've seen the importance of it in our 250-year history. And if there's anything that we have seen erode in those last century, and certainly in these last couple of years, that has been the viability currently of our local news agencies. We need to do something, and we need to do something now.
And lastly, you live in a very diverse district and representing diverse constituency. How important is it to have local media that actually represents the diversity of the people in your district?
It is everything. My folks and diverse communities throughout this Commonwealth need to have media, need to have news, need to have coverage that is in a native tongue, that is covering their concerns, that is giving voice to communities' cries, and making sure that all of our voices are heard and all of our voices are shouted from the rooftops. So this is so important.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, we're here with Mike Rispoli, Senior Director of Journalism and Civic Info Policy. Tell us why you're here today and what just happened.
I'm here at the state capitol in Harrisburg, where lawmakers today just passed the Pennsylvania local news package out of committee. These two bills would strengthen local news across the state, as well as make sure that communities have the news and information that they need to stay informed and engaged. HB 2047 would create a fellowship program that would place journalists all around the state of Pennsylvania, but most importantly, giving them jobs in communities where local news has disappeared or has never been there to begin with. And this way we have journalists in communities covering what's happening in local school boards, covering the environment, and making sure that people can know what's happening with their neighbors. The second bill, HB 2048, would establish the Pennsylvania Civic Information Consortium. This independent public grant-making body would invest in local news and information around the state. The consortium is modeled after a similar initiative in New Jersey that for the past 6 years has invested over $10 million in state funds into supporting local news, and has proven to be one of the most effective models in addressing the local news crisis that's affecting the people of Pennsylvania.
So what's next? What does Free Press Action plan to do now that the bills have passed out of committee?
We can't state enough how big of a step today was. We saw lawmakers from across the aisle talking about the importance of local news, and we saw this package clear a key committee vote. Now what we're going to be doing, we're going to continue to talk to residents around the state of Pennsylvania, talk to journalists, media makers, civic leaders about how they can get involved to support this important issue, because this is not just really a matter of supporting local news or supporting the journalism industry. This is really about supporting informed communities, which is an issue that residents from a variety of backgrounds, really no matter your background in the state, something that they can get behind.
And how can people get involved?
You can check out freepress.net on how to get involved. You can also call your local representative telling them that you support HB 2047 and HB 2048, the Pennsylvania local news package.
All right, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, you just heard from folks who were supportive of the PA local news package. Of course, being a small local newsroom where resources are limited, we definitely have an interest in initiatives like these. And I have also heard from people all around the state who are in the same boat as us. They are small, hyper-local news outlets. Some of them are new, and they have small staffs, and it's really difficult to get money from philanthropic institutions. And if you're like the Philadelphia Hall Monitor, where we make our content available free, it can be hard to generate enough income to continue to grow and expand our work. So we'll keep tracking this package of bills and see if it makes the governor's desk. In the meantime, continue supporting your local newsrooms across the state of Pennsylvania.
All right. Thank you very much, Vanessa. A lot going on right now. Some of it very good. Some of it's still concerning. But we're glad to see that this is moving along.
Yeah, one thing I'll just add before I go is that even though almost all the Republicans voted against this bill, the vote fell on party lines. They all agreed that we need local journalism. They agreed that there is a crisis within local news, and they all talked about the value of having more reporters at the state capitol. How cool would it be if we could have sent somebody to see the budget address, and just have more people on the ground? So at least there is one common thing that we all agree on, is that local news is super important. So again, we'll keep tracking that and keep all of you posted. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you, Vanessa. So I'd like to take a moment of personal privilege here at the end of the show to acknowledge the passing of Sister Nora Nash, who was a member of the Sisters of St. Francis of Philadelphia. Sister Nora was a shareholder advocate. And what that means is the Sisters of St. Francis would buy just enough shares of stock to go to meetings for Boeing and, weapons manufacturers, the big banks, everybody, and to give them hell. That's what they would do. Wells Fargo, ExxonMobil, JP Morgan, Chevron, all the big ones. And what would eventually happen is the CEOs of these companies would invite Sister Nora to meetings so that she wouldn't come to the shareholder meeting to give them a hard time, but she went anyway. And there was this one time, the CEO of Goldman Sachs took his helicopter to the convent and landed it across the street so he could talk to Sister Nora and try to talk her into not going to the meeting, but she did anyway. She also chaired a committee that awarded small grants to organizations and people all over the world. And these grants were asking very basic things like funds so a village in Africa could have a cow, so the village could have milk, or chickens so an orphanage in India could have eggs for the children. And I don't, most of these people probably didn't know who she was or where this money came from, and she didn't care. She just said it has to get done. So she did it. And she was a friend of mine. And I was on that social justice committee with her. That's how I got to know her. And that was a very rewarding experience. And like I said, we became friends. We went to baseball games together. We went to Gettysburg, and we went to protests a lot. And I think it's fair to say, without Sister Nora's influence, I don't know that I'd be here doing this job right now. So she was a very special person, and there won't be anybody else like her. So that'll be it for tonight. Next week on the show, we'll have Rue Landau, Denise. Mm-hmm. So, and more about budget, because that's going to be coming up here in the city sooner than you think. So thank you very much, and we will see you next week.